that talent apart, hard work actually works. And with virtually everything, it might not make you the best at whatever it is you're pursuing, but it will certainly make you better than you are. And then I have this new book. I hope you got a copy, because did you get a copy? Okay. So I'm bringing it up for a particular reason. I have a chapter in this book called, well, there's two that are relevant. Imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that. That's one. And then the course, or what would you call it? A complementary chapter is work as hard as you possibly can on one thing and see what happens. And that's also predicated on this idea that discipline is a precondition to freedom. So you were fortunate, like you had this goal, right? So that meant you had a goal, which is a really big deal because you could learn about goals. You had a sense of a higher mode of moral being, that I would rather be a good SEAL than the person I am now. Well, it's a code of behavior and a way of perceiving. So there's an ethic in that. And then you said as well, your conception of what good SEAL meant changed as you matured, but that's also fine. It wouldn't have changed unless you would have pursued that initial, only partially accurate goal. And so that's also a really good thing for people to understand is like, if you don't know what you're doing, aim at something. Is it the right thing? No, but it's better than just shooting randomly. So you aim at something, and then as you aim and you move towards it, you're going to find out why you're wrong. And then you might recalibrate your aim. And that's going to happen over and over because as you move towards a goal, it recedes or it broadens or it recedes and broadens. And otherwise you'd run out of things to do. So, but anyways, back to the story. You have this identity, and you said it was there in you all right from the beginning because you would play army by yourself, even in the forest by your house, I presume. Yes. And how old were you, do you think, how long back can you remember having that as a fascination?
I do not remember wanting to do anything else.
So would you say, is that as early as 4, 3, 5, preschool, something like that? Can you remember playing when you were that young?
I can't remember, a specific age, but if I think back to, hey, that looks like what I want to do. I remember I want to be a soldier.
And you remember when you were a kid? I mean, I'm fascinated by this because, well, one of the things I really noted when I had kids was how much their personality was there right from the beginning. Like my children are quite different. They have their similarities, but they're quite different from one another. And those differences were there right from the beginning, and they've maintained themselves throughout their lives. And so it's fascinating to see that destiny in some sense is built right into the person to begin with. And so, well, this was built into you by all appearances. And so it manifested itself in what attracted you even in play as a child. And that's the beginning of identity formulation, that play. And so what was it about being a soldier that you think attracted you when you were a kid? Like what was it that was so compelling? Because being a soldier is a multi-dimensional identity. There's the physical combat element of it. There's the strategic element of it. There's the discipline, the camaraderie. What were you playing, do you think?
I got asked this. I was talking to some folks at the Special Operations Command the other day, and they asked me, they set me up with this kind of beautiful possibility or opportunity for me to give some kind of an incredibly beautiful answer to this very question, and there was something along the lines of, at what point did the opportunity to serve and sacrifice for your country reveal itself to you, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And all I'm thinking about is when I'm 8 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, I want a machine gun and I want to go fight a war. That's what I want to do. I would love to tell you that I, read some heroic book. I read the Odyssey and realized that I don't need to read any of that stuff.
Well, that wouldn't be relevant to do with 8 anyways, right? I mean, that's why I'm curious about what it was so early. you know? And so, okay, so for you, it had something to do with weaponry, apparently. I got to tell you a story about my father, okay?
Mhm.
And tell me if this produces any echoes.
Well, before you go,
Yep.
weaponry was like, for sure, that's fine, but it could be a club. I wasn't a kid that was obsessed with guns.
Okay.
It was, and maybe it was just, we're going to get out and run around with sticks and try and hit each other or get into rock fights.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have rock fights when you were a kid?
Well, we had ice fights because it was northern Alberta, but also dirt lump fights. And now and then those would have rocks. And I can remember it was usually the Protestant kids against the Catholic kids. I mean, there wasn't that much of a division between those two in our town, but the Catholic kids had their junior high and high school, and we had ours. And so our gangs were separate. And so we would have dirt lump fights in the vacant lots where buildings were being constructed. And those were extremely exciting. You know, now and then you'd take a dirt lump rock in the mouth, and that was a little bit on the painful side. But there's no doubt that it was extremely exciting. And so, and then
I cut you off about your dad and the gun.
Oh, well, my dad told me something, and then this might be more relevant to guns, but my dad collects single shot rifles, and he has a lot of them, like hundreds of them. And he's a gunsmith and makes stocks and hand carves them. And anyways, he's an artisan in that regard. And it's a real focal obsession. He's a great shot. He shot at the provincial level, which would be the state level in the US. But it was single shots, and he hunted. And so we grew up on moose meat and elk meat. And he brought elk into northern Alberta as part of a repopulation attempt. Anyways, I could never understand his fascination with guns. Because it was really a deep fascination. So it was something that elicited my curiosity. And at one point I realized that he only hunted with single shots. So he had one shot at whatever he was hunting. So it had to be a good shot. And so he was pushing himself. And then I realized, well, he was really obsessed with hitting the target, taking aim and hitting the target. And it was about that time I learned that the Greek word for sin, hamartia, meant to miss the target. So there's this tight alignment between taking careful aim at the center of something precisely and then bringing yourself into alignment so that you would hit that target. There's a deep morality in that. It's a morality of hunting. It might be a morality of combat, and it's really deeply embedded inside of people. And that was what had my father in its grip. And so I was wondering if the automatic interest that even the club elicited in you had something to do with that seeking, that hunting, that target seeking, or if, perhaps I'm barking up the wrong tree.
I would say no. But when you were talking about getting hit in the head with a dirt clump, and whether you get hit or not, when you get done with that situation, you are in an elevated state of mind, because that was dangerous, and it was a very high level competition. Because even when you're throwing a baseball or kicking a soccer ball around, there's no real danger in that situation. But when someone's hucking dirt clumps at your head, you get a legitimate rush from that. And it feels good. And
It's exhilarating. One of the most fun, yes, there's no doubt that it's exhilarating. One of the most fun days I ever had as a child, this was less dangerous. I lived next door to a policeman, an RCMP officer. And we went out one day, I was probably about 8, into my neighbor's backyard, and she had green tomatoes everywhere, far more than she was ever going to eat. And we had a green tomato war for like an hour and a half. And he was moving them at a pretty good velocity. So if they caught you, especially in the head, you kind of remembered it. But it was exhilarating, and it was really fun to engage in that with him. And I really do remember that. And I do remember those, I hadn't until today, but I do remember those dirt lump wars. And there is an exhilaration in pushing yourself like that.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't want to give the impression that I was, running around with camouflage paint going to high school, or I was, I was doing a bunch of other stuff too. I played soccer, I played basketball. We had, a bunch of different bands. We'd play music. I played bass in a band. I sang in a band. I played guitar. We did all kinds of other stuff, but I was always kind of just in the back of my mind, sort of wanted to do that job.
All right. So you went to the SEALs,
Mm-hmm.
and tell us about that a bit.
It was awesome. You're making more money than you could ever figure out to do with, I'm 19 years old and I am the richest person that's ever existed in my mind, because I'm making whatever it is, however many $1,000 every 2 weeks. And, my expenses were nothing. And so you're just totally stoked. You got a great job. You're working out, you're shooting machine guns, you're blowing things up, you're hanging out with a bunch of other guys that like to blow things up, and you can fight each other at the drop of a hat. And then you get done with a fight and you shake hands, and then you go eat a steak. And so you're just in this environment, and it's perfect. It's freaking awesome. So what was it like? It was awesome. That's what it was like.
It's funny, you read accounts of the Navy SEALs, and I've never read it as enthusiastic an account as that account right there.